All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. It's Thursday, and we got one more show this week, obviously, after today. That'll be Friday. And then we're going to see what's going to happen next week. It's supposed to be a lot of snow. I'm heading up to New York. If I get snowed up there, or there's some other issues, we'll see what happens Monday, obviously. So we'll keep you posted. It should be, hoping it will be a Carlos Monday. One of the stories I'm talking about today is one I particularly want to broach with Carlos. So we'll see whether we get to double bite of it. We'll see what happens. Definitely want to talk to you today, 240-242-5646, 240-242-5646. And yeah, one of my favorite topics, like how do we win? How do we be effective? How do we convince people to vote for the left, to vote for left candidates, progressive, truly progressive candidates? I don't really have a big problem. You want to call it progressive, you want to call it. I think progressive has gotten kind of a dirty, it's kind of gotten a bad rap these days because a lot of non-progressives, right, people, because to me, progressive means you're moving towards a better, fairer, juster society, cleaner society, right? Environmental laws, peace. A lot of progressives, they're not so much. So you might say left, right? But I'm not always totally on board with what I think people would consider to be truly leftist policies, which is, kind of look, you want to argue about capitalism. I think we have enjoyed a lot of benefits from permitting groups of people to aggregate capital, to put capital together and invest it. That seems to have led to some real positives in the way we live our lives. A lot of negatives too, no question about it. Seems to me what we want to do is harness some of those positives, right? Central heating. Lots of different ways our lives are easier and lots of ways they're much worse. Look, would I prefer in the end, if I could wave a magic wand, we'd all be living, in caves or teepees or, some type of jungle layers, depending on where we, our group, our tribe lives. If I could wave a magic wand and we go back to that, yeah, I probably would, because we're right now living in a time of ecocide. And we're also living in a time, obviously, of mass extinction. And that's because of human activity. So, of course, I wish that wasn't happening. And it wouldn't be if we didn't have all these technological advances. But we do. And capitalism has obviously harnessed those technological advances, often in terrible, terrible ways, murderous ways, genocidal ways. But also, let's face it, our lives are in a lot of ways easier than they would be if we simply got rid of all of those technological advances, that many of which have come as a result of investments, people aggregating money. Now, I kind of put together market economy and capitalism, but they're not the same. If you have a farmer, if you have an artisan, they make products with their hands, and it's not based on people investing in them. That I wouldn't really call that capitalism, but still they have to make decisions based on what they can sell in the marketplace. The artisan, the baker, what kind of bread are people going to want to buy? What if I'm going to bake muffins today? What fruit or nuts are available or inexpensive that I can put into my batter and make muffins that I can sell at a profit, right? I pay less for the inputs than I get for the output. Now, I don't really call that capitalism, because capitalism seems to me includes an investment component. But still, you've got to rely on some market demand to make decisions as to what you produce. And, to me, that is kind of nascent capitalism. So, the idea, well, if you're a leftist, you kind of say, no, we're going to go in a Marxist way or what have you. And I don't know how that works. I haven't seen that working. You want to go back to some sort of communal living arrangements where we're in tribes, we live in small groups, family centered groups that include maybe half a dozen to a few dozen people, basically self-sufficient. fine. Again, I'd go back to that because right now we're facing the entire end of the world. And that's not hyperbole at all. I mean, it just isn't. But that ain't going to happen. So let's live in the world we live in and recognize that we are going to have investments, and that the investments, if we harness the power of investing in capital in ways that limit greatly the harm they can do while maximizing the benefit, that's what we need ultimately do. So the question I have is, how do we elect people, progressives, leftists? You know, I think Rahm Emanuel would say he's a progressive. He's apparently running for president. He's a horrible, horrible individual. We don't want him as president. But that doesn't mean just because he says he's progressive. You know, people can say they're whatever they want. That doesn't mean that's what they are. So I define progressivism as, again, moving towards a better world, much more income and wealth equality, which would also lead towards peace, lead towards a better, more sustainable future with the environment. You know, that's to me what progressivism is. But how do we get there? How do we get to that better place? And Lord knows I don't have an answer. I do this program with the hopes I'll come up with one. And so far, obviously we're not getting, right? I mean, it's just not happening. And I wish it were, but it hasn't yet. And I think a lot of ways things have gone the wrong direction. There have been times when I've been optimistic about what I do and the changes that are possible, but I'm not necessarily there now. I was very, very taken by this video. I'm going to just show the thumbnail one more time. Now, obviously, I opened with it, but I do want to show this thumbnail real quick because I love what these folks did. Maybe I'll show I wasn't going to start with this. I was going to go to some other stories, but yeah, why not? I don't know how well you can see that. Let me make it a full screen. But I was really taken by what these activists are doing and what they did. This is Dateline Jan 20, 2 days ago. And I'll play the video, but you can see they're sort of wearing face masks. And I have heroic, it says, Israel still blocks shelter and food from Gaza. Child starvation continues. And this is, as I believe commuters, I think from the lights, it's probably dusk. It could still be dawn, though. Could be morning. I think it's in the evening, and I can't quite tell the street. They say what protesters take the streets, probably take to the streets in Washington, D.C. to remind people of the ongoing genocide in Gaza. I think it's really important to do that. Remember, that's what I've been doing here for years, promoting the stories, trying to get them out there of just the horrible suffering that Israel is imposing on the Palestinian people and continues, and the United States is imposing on the Palestinian people. And this, to me, is about as effective as it gets in terms of getting that message across. You're standing out there in the cold, you're wearing those outfits, cars are zooming by. That, to me, is heroism. You're sacrificing. It's also patriotism. You're sacrificing for your country. But I do have to ask the question how effective it is. Is this moving the dial? What would move the dial? And I always have the answer. That is, we've got to gather together people of goodwill, of truly moral people with integrity, honesty, intellect, morality. And I think that's so many people. That's not like a few people. That's not like a half dozen. That's most of us. That's a lot of people that I get into fights with on social media who even insult me. I think you do want the best. I really do. I think we disagree as to what the best way to get there is. But I think our visions aren't even that dissimilar of what a better society looks like. You know, the great majority of Americans think billionaires have too much. They should be taxed at a higher rate. And yet we don't do that. All right, there's the blank screen. Let me get that video up for you right now. I hate seeing that little black screen. So here we go. This is the folks, the protesters. Again, heroic, yes. Effective, I don't know. Yeah, so really powerful stuff. And you've got a sign in there, you can't say you didn't know. I think we are desperate. Brianna Joy Gray made this point. She and I don't always agree. I'm going to center a guest she had on her program where she got into a pretty significant disagreement. Zed Jelani. I thought she actually had the better of Zed in that dispute, although I don't think she handled it very well. But I think Zed made some points in the New York Times that I really, really agree with that I don't know that Brianna Joy Gray does. But we'll talk about that in a little bit. But she made the point. We've already won the argument. It's not like we actually really do. I agree with this. Educate more people because people agree with us. We shouldn't be helping Israel wipe the Palestinian people off the map. We shouldn't have been promoting endless war with Russia in Ukraine or against Ukraine. Trump is crazy, is some kind of crazy megalomaniac. This Department of Peace or whatever he calls it is just obviously incredibly problematic in so many different ways. We don't want armed government thugs who swear oaths of loyalty. They do to the extent they do to the president, not to the rule of law, justice. None of us want that, or very few. Some do, I guess, Stephen Miller, but most of us don't want that. The problem is people don't have an alternative. We haven't seen that provided. And that's why I always say we need to run, not just find, right? Because there aren't a lot of good candidates out there. There just aren't. We need to identify people who will be, who could be, who would be on our side, and then run them. That's what we have to do. That is what Halitics is about. Find those good people. There are some, and when they win, if they win, then, by the way, here it is. Ice baby, love you, Heretic. Call in, love to talk to you. You disagree? Obviously, we don't agree on this double. 240-242-5646. Yeah, I don't know what you think ICE is doing for you. I saw an interesting post about that. People saying what those who do like Trump, and he's not popular, but the people who like Trump, what they like about him is he's sticking it to the libs, right? He's putting his thumb in our eye, and I'm not even a liberal. He's putting his thumb in the eye of the Democrats, and I get that. Neither side does much, but don't you want better than someone who all they're doing is putting their thumb in the eye, as you see it, of those you don't like politically? Don't you think we should have something a little better? I mean, I sure do. All right, 240-242-5646. Quite astonishing to me that anyone would see it differently. Democrats, just a real quick, I don't know, this story isn't that important. I honestly don't really think too, but I did talk about that ICE compromise. And remember the I've Had It podcaster, Jennifer Welch, was just laying into Cory Booker. I guess he's her new bête noire, if you want to call it that. Pardon the pun or no irony intended, but her main enemy now seems to be Cory Booker, who came on her show and she just really read him the riot act. And she said, you've got to take on ICE. And Booker, you're not doing that. And you're trying to make excuses. And if only they were better trained, and if only this, and if only that. No, we don't want paramilitary troops in the streets of our city. That's what Jennifer Welch said. I agree with her to a very significant degree. You want some sort of immigration enforcement, fine. They shouldn't be deployed in the fashion that they are right now. That should not be allowed. Democrats aren't taking that stand. And they were pretty willing, or very willing, it seems, to kind of say, yeah, well, we'll give you money. We won't give you as much as you say you want, but we'll give you as much as you had last year. And we're going to say you have to wear body cams. But, people wear body cameras and deprive others of their constitutional rights all the time. So in The Intercept, what's they're reporting on is so many Democratic voters, rank and file, are complaining, saying, yeah, we don't like your compromise. What you did wasn't good. You should have been much more willing to actually shut down the government. And Democrats say, oh, no, we can't do that. No, we can't do that. That causes more harm. I don't think it does. I think most Americans really have had it with Trump and the Republicans and their law and disorder policies. I think that Americans really want something different, and we want people who are going to fight for something different. And tragically, we're not getting that. And that's why Democrats are questioning this compromise that they reached. Now, it isn't definite because I suppose the Senate, what really has to happen, there's a filibuster, right? If the Senate can filibuster the increase, right? Lifting the budget debt. It's not the budget deficit, the debt, right? The national debt keeps going up, 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 up. And the statute says that there has to be either an increase in the budget debt or the government can't go above a certain level, which would mean there have to be lots of cutbacks in spending, effectively shutting down the government or large swaths of it anyway. Democrats thought, hey, we're getting the best of it. We can sort of limit ICE a little bit on paper, even though it will have little or no effect on their operations, and then declare victory. And their base is saying, no, we're not going to let you get away with that. But the problem is the Democrats know that they have basically their base by the short hairs. Sure, some of them, some black men, Latinos did go over to Trump for a little bit, but they're coming back. They're saying, hey, man, oh my God, Trump's even worse than we thought. Or worse than, he's as bad as the Democrats said. They're bad too. We don't know where to go. Democrats know they've got their base by the short hairs, so they can go ahead and give in and concede and, posture without actually taking any real wealth, power, influence from elites, which they haven't done right in 60 years. I mean, they've gone along, 40 years, whatever it is. You want to go back to Reagan, certainly when I believe a majority of Democrats, certainly a significant percentage of House Democrats led by Tip O'Neill went along with the massive budget Reagan tax cuts, which were disastrous, obviously, for our country. And, you can go on from there and point out all the different ways the Democrats have acceded to the demands of the billionaire class, which basically didn't exist until the maybe the Reagan tax cuts, right? Or there were a few. I think there was J. Paul Getty, maybe John D. Rockefeller. We had top marginal tax rates in the 90% range. Now there were very, very few billionaires. So we have them. There were, if they weren't literally billionaires in the 1890s and the 1880s, you certainly had a class of plutocrats, the Vanderbilt, J.P. Morgan, right? There's John Paul Getty. There's two J.P. billionaires, John Paul Getty, J.P. Morgan. I don't think maybe he wasn't a real billionaire, but, Carnegie, Rockefeller, Frick, those people. Top marginal tax rate, 95%. Takes away a lot of their wealth and power and means we have a freedom. We have democracy. We have a better country. Doesn't mean you get rid of capitalism altogether. It means you're able to impose the kind of limits and restrictions on the activities of the capitalists so that they can't do the harm that they've been able to do since at least the Reagan, quote, revolution, unquote. Democrats hearing from their base, but hey, as long as you keep voting for them, they're not going to change. Let's hope Wes Bell, by the way, on that note, is defeated in St. Louis. He was the AIPAC choice to defeat Cori Bush in St. Louis a couple years ago, and I believe she's taken him on again, and maybe she'll beat him, which would be really, really nice because that guy is one of the worst. You got to defeat these people. That's the only language they understand is being pushed out of power, and we haven't been able to. And pushing him out of power not to embrace a Trump, not to embrace a W. Bush, but to embrace a real Bernie, right? Bernie could have done something. Bernie could have really moved the party to the left, said, hey, I'm going to support independence. I'm going to support Greens. He could have done all of that completely. Trump. let's get to Trump. We're going to also, what do Democrats do? We're going to talk a lot about that. So, and we can focus on what Democrats can do with respect to Trump's latest victory. Here's the Greenland proposal Axios is reporting that Trump now has endorsed. And remember, Trump was saying, oh no, the U.S. has to own Greenland. We need Greenland. Give us Greenland. That's the only way we can protect Greenland. I saw this meme, somebody saying, yeah, Dems just want to give Russia and China Greenland. That was the meme. Now, last I checked, Russia and China ain't looking to take over Greenland. Yeah, they're maybe using the ice-free or certainly now navigable Arctic during the summer because of anthropogenic global warming. They are maybe putting some ships there, especially Russia, because, Russia more than, I think Russia surrounds about half of the Arctic, right? About, if you drew a circle around the Arctic, about 50% of that circle would include Russia. So, yeah, they're going to go on there. I mean, you're not going to stop them. Their sports, the merman's going to like. But this idea that somehow they're going to take Greenland is really, really ridiculous. And it's especially ridiculous because the U.S. has bases there. The U.S. has submarines. They're going under the Arctic Ocean right now, under the ice right now, to the extent there is still ice. There's no way Russia, maybe China, are going to go try to exploit that area. And you've also got NATO protecting it. But Trump, nevertheless, for whatever reason, decided he probably read a book. Maybe he saw a globe or something in somebody's living room and said, I want that island right there. It's a big island. I want it. Green, right? Color of money. So I want it. But now Trump has said, oh, no. We will, we've reached an agreement. We've got a great agreement with Denmark. And per two sources, now this is Guy Rutte is the Danish prime minister. I don't think he's anything special. I think he's kind of a right winger too. He's may have been kind of an immigrant because Denmark embraced some pretty retrograde policies, very disappointing there, but country that had always been committed to human rights, but they had some problems with immigrants. And this is a big reason with Muslim and Arab immigrants from Arab countries. This is why the West's policy that has done so much harm, so much destabilizing of the Middle East. Yeah, you get people who leave, who flee their homeland. They go to some new place. They're not always, usually the first generation are extremely law-abiding, commit very few crimes, but often the second generation, you have problems. They don't feel welcome. They're not fully at home in their new land, but they don't really feel comfortable with the people, who come from the countries where their parents are from either. And there's a lot of issues. They're not economically secure. So yeah, you get problems. That's why what we should be doing is stabilizing, promoting democracy around the world. Not doing exactly what Trump just did, regime change, which causes more chaos, more problems. Not doing what the Clintons did to Haiti, destroying that country, so that which was already so impoverishing it further, exploiting it for your clients, which is what the Clintons did with Haiti. Yeah, that's going to cause problems. Dane's reaction, well, we're going to crack down on immigrants. Very sad. Rutte there saying, no, we're going to, we'll work with you, Trump, but we're not going to transfer sovereignty of Greenland. We're not going to take our Danish citizens, because Greenland is actually just part of Denmark, just like Hawaii is part of the United States, right? It's not connected. There's no land connection. There's no bridge. It's, 4 or 5 hour flight from San Francisco to Hawaii. And it's a long, long way from Greenland to Copenhagen. But you live in Greenland, you're a Danish citizen, you vote in Danish elections, you move to Denmark, you're not moving anywhere. You're in the same country. And they don't want to be part of the United States. Why would they? They have universal single-payer health coverage. They have They have free education at very good universities. Why the hell would they want to become American? They don't. And this proposal that now I think Trump has embraced, this is great, says Trump. Or at least, So the release from the White House. Now I could just make fun of Trump and say, you made you did a lot of saber rattling, and in the end, you didn't get, you got nothing out of it, right? It's just basically, if the deal goes through, U.S. will be achieving all of its strategic goals with respect to Greenland at very little cost forever. Wow, I thought we needed control. Didn't Trump say only if the U.S. owns Greenland can we protect it? Trump is proving once again, says Caroline Levitt, he is the deal maker in chief. Wow. So I guess, hey, I could make fun of Trump. I could say, basically you didn't get anything more than what had been on the table from the beginning. According to Axios, the ideas raised by Root echo the Danish proposal that has been long on the table. Denmark retains sovereignty, but the U.S. is able to increase its military presence. I could again make fun of Trump for that and say, well, you made a big deal, you saber rattled, you scared everybody, you made the markets go sideways for a bit or actually drop. Now you can come back. And for nothing, you got what was long on the table. But I'm not going to say that. I'm going to say, congratulations, deal maker in chief. You are so smart. You were playing three-dimensional chess while the rest of us were playing checkers. You figured it all out. You got from Denmark and NATO exactly the same deal that you could have gotten without any of this nonsense. And basically, there's no real change, right? There's no difference. It's basically just updating a treaty that was in effect 75 years. And the U.S. says we can increase our military presence there. It already was increased. There are already bases there anyway. I don't like increasing our military presence. I think we should be cutting back our military budget. Trump campaigned on a leaner, meaner military. It was Kamala who said we need the most lethal force in the world. But hey, either way, look, the generals, but not even the generals, maybe the retired generals who are running or are board members of giant weapons manufacturers, people like Lloyd Austin, they win no matter what. People like Antony Blinken. He's got his weapons consulting firm. He's going to win no matter what. Avril Haines with, what is it? The Seeing Stone. I always think of it from Lord of the Rings because it's named after these stones that you look into and you can see, far away. One stone sees the other. I forget, but that's her company, or she worked certainly promoted them. That's Biden's national intelligence director. Lloyd Austin was his chief of staff, military chief of staff, and Blinken, of course, the Secretary of State. Austin, actually, defense secretary. So, Biden's defense team, they win whether Biden's president or whether Trump's president. That's what we see all the time. And, what are you going to do? I'll tell you what you do. You vote for Green Party candidates. You don't vote for Dems. You get behind alternatives who are better, who are actually good. Because I want to say better. Because if the Democrats were good, but okay, well, maybe the Greens a little better. I don't want to split my vote. I don't want to break people off when we have winner-take-all elections. Maybe we just have to coalesce against the slightly less good, but still good option. No, Democrats are bad too. They cause problems too. They are making things worse too all around the world. That's why you don't vote for them. This is from, and again, what do we do, right? This program, what was my question? I want to see what my question was when I did this. Let's see, because I can't remember. Oh, effective, heroic, yes, meaning the people standing on the streets of Washington, D.C., protesting the Israeli-American genocide. They are heroes. No question. I have so much respect for these people, and I think they do make a difference. I'm not saying it's a waste of time. It's not. But in the end, the way we make change is we elect good people. We change who is in power. Because let me tell you what, Trump doesn't give a crap. He doesn't care how many people are on the streets of D.C. holding up signs. Now, he might send the National Guard out to arrest people and beat them up. He might be angry, but he's not going to change his policy. He doesn't understand protesters. He understands force. He understands being told no by people who can actually stop him in certain ways, who have some ability to stymie him politically or stymie him militarily. He understands that. He understands that a united Europe has some real power that it can wield against him. So maybe I'm not going to go to war with them, right? But he doesn't get protests. Those are people to beat up, to knock heads, to claim they're the ones who started it. So the way you win is you elect good people. Here's what Nate Silver asked with his neo-lib buddy there, Matt Iglesias. Were the resistance libs right about Trump? And he did this video in response to a Michelle Goldberg piece, which was going on and on, Michelle Goldberg in the New York Times. I think is, and I've said this before, very mediocre columnist, doesn't really bring much, if anything, of value to the table. But she went on about how, the women in their pussy hats were totally, because it was a response to grab their pussy. Of course they were right. That's how bad Trump is. He's as bad as we feared. We needed to do much better. And yeah, we did. But I thought that was really interesting the way Silver responded to this argument, where I think it kind of shows you how both Silver, obviously Iglesias, I'm not going to get into Iglesias. He is just the worst. But how both Silver and Goldberg in the Times really, because of their ideology, their moderate centrist ideology, both get it wrong. And because I think they're paid to get it wrong, right? If Goldberg were a true champion of populism, of workers, peace, she wouldn't have a column anymore in the New York Times. Oh my God, they have her out there quicker than S through a goose. So here's what Silver says in response to Goldberg. And I think he's kind of right, but then he really, really misses the point, Goldberg's point, which is a bad point, but he misses it. So, or her conclusion, maybe her point is right, her conclusion is wrong. The resistance libs, meaning those who say anyone but Trump, right? Any blue will do. We have to defeat him first. I think one person who falls into that category clearly is Jamie Raskin. I was talking to a pretty influential Democrat about Raskin, and they were telling me how great, they didn't frame it. I think they do really like Raskin, but they didn't frame it that way. They framed it about how popular he is. He's the most popular Democrat maybe in all of Congress, how beloved he is in his district. And I said, well, the people the people you talk to are the people who really like Raskin, but there are a lot of people maybe who don't. And they said, yeah, you're right. I'm kind of that liberal, elite type, educated, who fears and hates Trump. So yeah, maybe there are other people who have different values or different economic concerns. Maybe they're not as big fans of Raskin. But remember what Raskin did. Raskin tried to impeach Trump after Trump had lost to Biden. And he was doing everything possible just to defeat Trump, embarrass Trump, bring to light all the terrible things Trump had done. Trump did a lot of really bad things. Trump did try to stay in office illegally. Trump, I do believe, conspired to subvert an election. But Raskin's methodology actually backfired spectacular. And I said it would. I said it would. You want to defeat Trump. Do good things for the American people. Make life better for them. Promote popular policies that will improve the quality of the life of Americans, like Medicare for all. Don't distract us with these hearings that became, without question, hyper-partisan, right? And Trump wasn't impeached because, in the end, Republicans did rally behind him, which was very foreseeable. Now, I don't say maybe they should have done hearings, but part of those hearings should have been with the understanding we can do two things at once. We're not going to distract you with an impeachment. We're going to keep our eye clearly focused on making your life better so you'll want to vote for us. Raskin didn't do that. That's why I have a huge problem with him. The resistance libs deserve major demerits for defining, for nearly to a person, man, I wish I could read, denying how profound a political and substantive problem it was for Biden to try to run for another term when he was clearly unfit to do so. I want to be real clear. It wasn't just like the so-called resistance, right? The indivisible, any blue will do. There were Dems like Bernie, kind of not a Dem, independent, what have you, and AOC, who often took issue with Joe Biden, didn't agree with his policies. AOC famously saying at one point, if we had more of a democracy or something like that, I can't, paraphrasing here, Biden and I wouldn't even be in the same party. And yet she's telling us, oh, he's totally ready to go. I think the reason the resistance libs said Biden is ready to run is fine is because they knew they couldn't get rid of him, right? They knew, the resistance libs, it wasn't that they because according to Silver, the resistance libs told you how bad Trump was, but they didn't really believe it. They weren't really that afraid of Trump. I think they were. I think they are. I think a lot of the resistance libs, people who are really big on things like choice, who believe in process, maybe they are much more pro-immigrant. And those are good things. I'm not saying they're not. They very much feared a Trump presidency. But they thought, these are people who aren't really focused, though, on true economic justice. They're not really focused on demanding that Democrats do what's best for the American people writ large. They have their pet issues, some of which I think are very important, and that's what they care first and foremost about. The resistance libs. Like I said, I think choice is right there at the top. Gay rights, a lot of identity politics stuff. You can put it that way. I don't think they embraced Biden and then later Harris, right? They didn't demand we find somebody who can win an election because Kamala Harris, the real doubts about her, right? Which there should have been, since in 2020, she got zero support whatsoever in the primaries. It was obvious she wasn't a good candidate, even before she was a candidate. What Silver is saying is these resistance libs obviously didn't really think Trump would be that bad because they didn't demand someone other than Biden and or Harris. Well, the problem with that argument is I think those resistance libs recognize that they weren't going to get someone other than Biden and or Harris. And I also think they kind of like Biden and or Harris. They didn't view Biden and or Harris the way we do, who recognize how bad they are. And C, they believed, and maybe they were right, that the kneecapping of Joe Biden and then the refusal, the tepid response by the left to Kamala Harris helped Trump win. And I think Trump would have won no matter what. I think the tepid response to Harris and Biden was based not as much on Biden's, he was incompetency. I think it was based on the fact that we thought he wasn't a good president. He did really bad things. Whereas the people who embraced Biden until the end liked what he was doing. They liked endless war with Russia. They didn't have a problem with the support for the genocide. So I think Silver gets it wrong. The resistance libs defended Biden until the end because they really didn't believe there was a better option. And they also were afraid that by criticizing him, they would help Trump. Likewise with Harris. So yeah, he just misses that boat. But the reason he ultimately misses that boat, Silver does, is because he doesn't want to acknowledge the stranglehold that neo-lib, neo-con policies have over so many Democrats. He sees these elections as horse races. Which is the best horse? Which horse is most likely to win? And he says, well, I could see that Joe Biden wasn't a good horse and that Kamala Harris wasn't much of a better horse. So the Trump horse would probably beat both of them. So if I really was that afraid of the Trump horse, I would have found a different horse. But who would be that horse, Silver? I mean, I don't know. Maybe Gavin Newsom. That horse might have won. I get it. But there was also a real good chance that horse wouldn't win. And ultimately, the policies aren't any better. So Silver refuses to engage in an actual analysis of policy. And that's why he takes the position he does, because he doesn't think ultimately the problems with Biden and Harris were their policies. Thinks it was Biden was incompetent, which he was, and Harris was a poor politician, which she is. But they're in the end, because what they're promoting isn't what the American people want, isn't what's best for us. Silver won't say that, and Goldberg won't say that. So that's not how you win elections. You win elections by promoting popular policies that lead to good results. Here's another way, and I really appreciate this. I don't know. I go back and forth on this. And I also, again, give me a call. I haven't been hearing from folks. 240-242-5646. I know you're out there somewhere. Give me a call. Give me a jingle. Let's get this. Let's build this program. Yeah, we're seeing more folks subscribing. That's great. Love it. But yeah, this has got to be a place, a clearinghouse, where we talk about the challenges we face and how to solve them. Democrats' racial politics, right? This is Zed Jelani. I mentioned him a couple days ago. This really struck me. And, if only somebody else had come up with this, was saying the same things as Zed Jelani. Oh, yeah, they are. Me. I've been saying this for at least 10, 12 years. I took down the halginsberg.com website, but I had a number of posts that were very similar made the exact same arguments 10, 12, 14 years ago that Zed Jelani is making now, which is that Democrats should not, when they promote policy, they should not talk about how those policies will benefit discrete identity groups. They should talk about how those policies will benefit the American public. That's his biggest argument. And it is 100% correct. Now, you could make the case that therefore Democrats shouldn't promote reparations. I could make the case that this is a good reason. And by the way, this is my biggest look. I've said this before. I'll say again. I will vote green. I'm going to vote for. I can't believe I won't. I'm going to vote for Andy Ellis to be the governor of Maryland, and he does center more certainly than Wes Moore or than the Republican who is Larry Hogan. They really don't talk much about racial politics. Democrats do a lot. Wes Moore not so much. Andy Ellis centers racial politics far more. He promotes, for example, reparations, which Moore vetoed, and then it was overturned, the veto, by the legislature here in Maryland. I don't think that's the best way to address poverty. I don't think that's the most effective way. I think there are a lot of problems with reparations. But that said, especially political, but that said, I will vote for Andy Ellis, even though I don't agree with him on Well, like I said, I would have voted for the bill, but I'm very squishy on it. But I will vote. I will vote for Andy, even though he does embrace a racial politics that I don't agree with. Butch Ware is almost every speech or every, speech is larded, is peppered with discussions about, white supremacy, white privilege, and the like. This was something that Jill Stein did as well. I think that is bad politics. I think that hurts you. I don't agree with it. But I'll still vote for them because in the end, I think what they would do is much better for our country. But it hurts you. It means you're not as likely to win. The way you win is you talk about policies that will help poor, struggling, and working Americans, period, end of story. And you can even see that the identity politics, to the extent that Democrats practice it, didn't really help them. Trump got more black male votes, votes from black men than other Republicans in recent years. He may have won the Latino male vote. But what we're seeing, Democrats, and he talks about, I cherry-picked this sentence here, in the face of such divisive white identity politics. So what Jelani is saying is that overt appeals, or at least kind of, barely masked appeals to whites by Republicans have been effective, have led to, according to Zed Jelani, they're divisive. They're effective. And what he's saying is Democrats are seeing this and they're getting the wrong lesson rather than saying, okay, well, we need to avoid these politics because they hurt us, right? White identity politics, politics based on color, ethnicity, they don't help. They don't help us win, right? And yet, in the face of that evidence, many Democrats, says Jelani, hang on to a racial progressivism that will prevent the party from assembling a broad enough coalition. My words, exactly. I hope he's reading my work. I hope that's where he got from. And by the way, why it's such a, putting everything else aside, if you care first and foremost about addressing America's historic, right, slavery injustices, right, slavery, genocide of the native population here, the indigenous peoples, if that's what you care about addressing, when you practice identity politics, you make it less likely you're going to be able to address the very problems that you seem to be saying are most important. And obviously contemporary injustices as well. If you can't win, you're not going to get the opportunity to make life better for people. And what Jelani centers here in this article is research. Now, I don't know. You can find research that says anything. So I'm somewhat skeptical. I believe this. No, I mean, I don't know. I don't know that this research is better than other research. I'm sure this is true. Framing progressive policies such as increasing the minimum wage or Medicare for all around how much they benefit minorities or achieve racial justice makes it less likely that people will support those programs. In other words, what you should talk about is, hey, we're all better off except for those billionaires who've made your life miserable for 40, 60, 80 years, or however long, 15 years, 18 years, however old you are. These policies make us all better off except for those few at the top of the tree who suck. Let's face it. So yes, we should raise the minimum wage. Yes, we need Medicare for all. That will make your life better, not say, well, that will make life better for this person or that person because of their skin color. That's incredibly important. I want to make another point. Medicare for all, at least when I've talked about this to people who are explicit race-based politicians, right? People who say, yeah, I'm in it to make life better for my people, for my group. I've heard them say, well, the problem I have with, I've heard this, the problem I have with Medicare for all is that it lifts all boats. And when you lift all boats, then the boats that are lower will still be lower. I've heard that. I've heard, no, the problem with Medicare for all is it doesn't equalize the boats first. Well, I don't know what you do with that argument. Are you saying you need to impoverish more white people first so that their healthcare is on average as bad as many African Americans' healthcare? I don't know what it's also false because Medicare for all doesn't lift all boats equally. If you already have really good healthcare, Medicare for all will be good for you. You won't be paying the premiums out of your salary. You'll probably be able to negotiate a better wage with your employer. But ultimately, Medicare for all leaves everybody with the same health care or very close to it. No, not perfectly, but much closer. So yes, Medicare for all does indeed improve the quality of healthcare and of life for people of color, people who have bad healthcare outcomes right now. It will do wonders to lead to result or to cause more equitable solutions. But the idea that somehow if we target people of color by saying, oh, this is really good for you, this is better for you, that will make it more likely that voters will embrace Medicare for all is a false one. It's false in that white people will say, well, wait a second. If this policy is so good for black people, why are you only talking about how it's good for black people? Maybe it's not so good for me. That's one aspect. The other aspect is that people who are focused solely on improving the quality of life for their identity group aren't going to support it anyway, because it actually does help everybody or almost everybody. So clearly, Democrats should not identify when they're promoting particular legislative solutions the specific benefits for one group and avoid discussing, ignore, or simply, elide the benefits for other groups. No, talk about how we all benefit. We're all in the same boat. We all have similar interests. We all want our families to have good health care. We all want to be able to get treatment without worrying about bankruptcy. That's how you win. And I'm centering this because that's what's effective. I'm centering this not just to promote Jelani, because, I've said this forever. But, people say, oh, well, it was in the New York Times. And if Zed Jelani says in the New York Times, I guess maybe I can believe it. Whereas if Hal says it, who gives a crap? I wish that weren't the case. Unfortunately, it is. So here's what Jelani says. Many marquee Democratic policies like raising the minimum wage. Now, is that really a marquee Democratic policy? Joe Biden had an opportunity to raise the minimum wage. He didn't do it. He could have said, no, we're going to do this. I don't care what the Senate parliamentarian says. We're going to pass this bill. Period. End of story. He could have, he did not. It's not a marquee. Some form of guaranteed health care is not a marquee Democrat policy. They have repeatedly resisted efforts to guarantee health care for all. Universal child care and paid family leave, some people talk about it. They're popular with the public, and they would broadly benefit working and middle-class people. Yeah, it's all true. That's how you win, is you promote those policies. That's not what Democrats do. Emphasizing the racial angles of these policies, which percentage of which racial grouping will get what, is just asking for political division where none should exist. 100%. Could not agree with that more. I again, talking about myself here, wrote a piece I submitted a piece to Jacobin where I made this exact point about Hillary Clinton and her focus on identity politics, which I called slice and dice policies. I can't remember exactly. Where she slices the electorate into little, bits based on race and other innate characteristics, sex, gender, that she did that and said, here's how my policy will benefit you. This is how my policy will benefit your group. And nobody believed her, and with good reason. The way you win is you talk to the voters and you recognize our shared humanity, our shared concerns, our shared interests. And that's what Jelani is saying. Why doesn't the Democrat Party do this? It's so obvious. Really a no-brainer. So why don't they do this? Because they don't really want a raised minimum wage. They don't want every American to have health care. Some may. They don't want peace. He doesn't talk about foreign policy, but we do want peace. Democrats, hey, they're in the pocket of the people who profit from these incredibly harmful policies. That's why they don't do what Jelani says. That's why we need to find leftists who will, progressives who will. And I think that's what Mamdani did. Dr. King did this. You can talk about how some groups, some people face terrible injustices. De-emphasizing how one group alone will benefit more from certain policies doesn't mean that you don't talk about injustice. It doesn't mean you don't say, hey, this community is really suffering. We've got to help this community. Yes, you do that. But at the same time, you point out how we're going to help all communities that are suffering, all communities that are struggling. That's the answer. I don't know why this is so hard. It's heartbreaking to me. It's heartbreaking to me that so many folks just refuse to get this. All right, 240-242-5646, coming up on the end of the show. Dolly the dog, by the way, just so folks know, has been outside this entire program. It's warmer out. I thought I'd hear her barking. I didn't. I tried to get her, and that's why we started a little late. She went outside. She wouldn't come in. I'm glad. Good. She's outside. She's, who knows what we'll see. I'll go out and get her as soon as I'm done, which is going to be very, very, very soon. I've been on now. Let me try to see if this thing tells me. I think the YouTube, one of them will tell me. 58 minutes, 47 seconds. Hey, Don, thanks for the like. Appreciate that. We'll just real quick. I'll kind of tease this for tomorrow. This guy, I don't know who Adam Carlson is, but he posted a list of people, Democrats, who are probably running for president. These are not people none of them are going to talk about policies that are going to be good for you, that are going to make your life better, that are going to focus on how to improve living conditions for most Americans. They're just not. Maybe Andy Beshear, he's got a little bit of populist cred, I guess, from being Kentucky governor, but I don't think there's much there. I think I'm wrong. I think I'm right about that. Buttigieg, McKinsey guy, military guy, gentrifier. And, somebody was saying, let's not be too hard on gentrification. I get that. Yes, if a neighborhood is coming up and people are starting to, upgrade the apartments and they become more expensive and wealthier people want to move in, that is bad for the people who live in that neighborhood. But as long as you can make sure that the benefits, i.e. rising real estate prices, a higher tax base, filter down, make sure that they benefit the current residents and they're not all pushed out and you protect them, then gentrification can be a good thing. That's not what Buttigieg did, though, as mayor of South Bend. Rahm Emanuel, enough said. Gavin Newsom, what a smarmy, fakey he is. Josh Shapiro, I think he's a phony. There's no meat there. The guy is clearly pro-Israel. He's never taken any meaningful criticism of Israel. Neither has Newsom, by the way. Cory Booker, we've talked about him at length. Terrible choice. Kamala Harris, likewise. Mark Kelly, he makes some good ads. He was an astronaut. There's no progressivism there. Chris Murphy, I don't really know much about him. The billionaire, Pritzker, they're all meh at best. I did highlight Chris Van Hollen. I would vote for Chris Van Hollen. I might vote for AOC. It would be a tough sell. There's some of the others I might vote for depending on their campaigns. But Westmore. I mean, come on. Can't we do better than this? Can't we do? I mean, how could the Democratic field be much worse without being Republican? I don't think it could be. All right, that is going to do it for today's Halitics. I thank you so much for being part of Halitics. And thank you, Diego, for the looking great. I do urge again, hey, if you like what I'm doing here, share, all that stuff. Subscribe. See if I can get that. So I'm not sure if it's going to be up or, yeah, it'll be there. There you go. Subscribe now. Click on the bottom right square, white and blue, and give me a call. Give me a jingle. Can't do it now. I'm hanging up, but I will see you tomorrow, noon.